Hello, my name is Seal, and my research paper is on abortion politics. Abortion is defined as the deliberate termination of human pregnancy. The single issue has fueled furious debates about whether the practice should remain legal or prohibited, as explored in the depths of my research paper. Complex historical, political, legal, ethical, and social dimensions shape the discourse of both sides on this issue. Tracing America's past reveals how early colonial attitudes tolerated abortion as an acceptable private choice. Yet, opposition gradually mobilized in the 1800s on moral grounds for terminating fetal life. The landmark 1973 Supreme Court case, Roe v. Wade, invoked privacy rights to establish national access to abortion. However, an ensuing conservative backlash rejected the protection as enabling violence against the unborn. Consequently, contemporary abortion politics spotlights unsettled conflicts around the state power to restrict the practice versus established constitutional precedents upholding reproductive rights. My paper analyzes factors driving this intricate debate from shifting public attitudes over generations to critical court decisions, interest group advocacy, campaigns, partisan identities, and most profoundly, clashing moral perspectives on human personhood originating at conception. I highlighted the unresolved tensions between claims to state authority in the domains versus federal oversight and civil liberties. Tracing back to early American history, abortion was viewed as an acceptable private choice during the colonial and revolutionary eras. However, social views gradually shifted in the 1800s as Connecticut initiated the first abortion bans in 1821, followed by New York in 1828, on moral grounds opposing the practice. While not heavily enforced initially, these laws signaled changing societal opposition towards abortion as well as difficulty in imposing outright prohibition. By the 1950s, some liberalization re emerged, in some instances, threatening the mother's health or involving rape, incest, or fetal anomaly. However, safe access remained extremely limited, causing public health crises from dangerous legal abortions. The landscape transformed with the landmark 1973 Supreme Case ruling in Roe v. Wade, establishing a national right to abortion under privacy protections. However, Roe faced immediate backlash from conservative religious groups like the Catholic Church and the New Rights Political Coalition for enabling violence against unborn life in their moral view, strategically portraying the court as permitting violence against the unborn. These activists tapped into arguments on fetal personhood. They vowed enduring opposition through every political avenue possible to corrode federal protections over time. Despite some early barriers, this energetic opposition shaped the ensuing abortion debate by inserting moral arguments on human life beginning at conception. Although unable to directly overturn Roe initially, the they nonetheless advanced personhood views through recurrent policy, offensive across different governments level and the following years. Two pivotal Supreme Court cases, 1989's Webster ruling and 1992's Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision, marked crucial turning points empowering state level anti abortion efforts to erode access by enabling more creative restrictions. By upholding Missouri limits on public abortion provisions and fetal viability, tests, Webster signaled new judicial tolerance for state level regulations short of outright bans. Then, just 3 years later, Casey introduced a vague, undue burden standard allowing even more state restrictions as long as access was not substantially blocked. Consequently, over 1,300 laws limiting abortion rights proliferated in Casey's aftermath. By exploiting these opaque limits, groups enacted restrictions upon restrictions through more extended waiting periods. Early gestational cutoff dates, intrusive counseling rules, escalating clinic regulations, and documented harassment of providers. Thus, 1989's Webster ruling, followed by 1992's Casey decision, together unleashed a tidal wave of state restrictions to curb access and circumvent federal reproductive rights protections indirectly. By relaxing judicial scrutiny, the court allowed creative statutory burdens on availability state by state in the name of moral opposition to abortion. So, these critical cases enabled the avalanche of state regulations and procedural barriers throttling access, highlighting unresolved tensions between women's constitutional freedom and newly empowered state intervention. While the 1973's Roe v. Wade ruling initially enabled nationalized access to abortion under privacy rights, subsequent court cases like 1989's Webster and 1992's Casey granted states much greater discretion to restrict reproductive access. Consequently, state legislatures have enacted a tidal wave of limitations from longer waiting periods to early gestational cutoffs to intrusive counseling rules, with lawmakers claiming a moral imperative. Records verify over 1,300 such laws complicating availability post Casey as anti abortion groups leverage principled opposition through procedural barriers and constraints on access. However, national pro choice advocacy groups like Planned Parenthood contest this exertion of state police powers that so greatly burdens services protected under federal constitutional rights precedents. The landscape illuminates unsettled conflicts between local versus central governance surrounding such decisive issue. Ultimately, the proliferation of state restrictions highlights open federalism, questions over whether state authority or established legal preced- precedent should prevail when addressing profoundly personal reproductive liberties. The dispute remains unresolved, ensuring continued debates at state and federal levels by moral disagreements. Several influential forces shape the complex, polarized abortion debate in America, from well organized interest groups to grassroots campaigns, partisan identities, and profound moral disagreements. Prominent national advocacy organizations like the National Rights to Life Committee and Planned Parenthood leverage moral arguments to wield substantial power over shaping party priorities and voter perspectives. Simultaneously, state level ballot initiatives and right to life legislation mobilize impassioned campaigns directly impacting legislative access and restrictions. Additionally, federal judicial outlooks and Supreme Court appointees determine whether limitations are permitted amidst pressures from advocacy groups on both sides. Finally, abortion access aligns clearly along partisan lines, neatly dividing Republican and Democratic politicians and voters based on ideological positions formed by ethical beliefs on human personhood. In a sense, These complex social forces, from interest groups, grassroots mobilization, legal evolutions, partisan identities, and moral worldviews, dynamically interplay to produce the enduring contentions surrounding abortion politics. In closing, the intricate politics surrounding abortion access involve profound tensions, balancing policy authority, civil rights precedent, and profound moral disagreements over intensely personal healthcare decisions. As seen, this issue spotlights complex disputes over reproductive rights versus governmental regulatory power against a backdrop of dynamic legal evolutions, advocacy pressures, partisan identities, and ethical beliefs within society. Thank you and have a great day.